Hey everybody, I'm working my way through the character bots on chess.com, just building my way up. So I'm rated in the 1400 to 1500 band at the moment, so it's starting to get a bit tougher. Next one up is Lorenzo, 1800 rated, and I played this guy. I've tried him a few times this week, finally got a win yesterday, so let me take you through the game. So we have a Sicilian, Open Sicilian, Nimzovich variation, and now I hit the knight. Because it basically, you win a tempo doing this, whatever happens, knight's going to have to move. Knight moves to there, hit it again with the bishop, and now I've developed both of my king side minor pieces, so I'm ready to castle. Knight remaneuvers and attacks the bishop, and I defend by developing the queen. So always good idea. All other things being equal, if you can achieve something you need to do, i.e., in this case, defend the bishop, with development, not a bad thing. And the queen's also adding a second defender to this pawn. Knight takes, queen takes. Okay, so I've got my queen out on the board, I've got my knight out on the board, I have a lead in development. This knight of blacks has taken a bit of a journey. 1, 2, 3, and then 4 jumps to get to here, and then it's gone. So it's taken all of those moves with it. So essentially, black has only played one move here, whereas I've played 1, 2, 3, 4, effectively, with this advanced e-pawn. So we have e6 and white castles. Knight comes out. d3 now makes way for this bishop to enter the game, and we have a pawn push. Now this pawn is actually undefended, so I did think about maybe just grabbing it, but I decided to slide over instead, just pin the knight to the rook there. Didn't know what kind of traps Lorenzo might have up his sleeve. I could have just grabbed it, I suppose. There's no immediate danger. Okay, bishop's now lining up for a discovery, so the queen drops back again to e2. So that's the downside of bringing your queen out into the board, is that now my opponent has a lot more development because I've had to be running away. Okay, so we have knight in here and an exchange of knights. So now black has double pawns on the d file, and we have a semi-open c file, and it's all good. Okay, knight now develops. Queen is looking at an undefended pawn on c2. So knight to f3, seeing as my other knight has come off the board. The opposite side knight can always reach the natural defensive square where it's defending the pawn next to the king on the edge there in 2 jumps. So the knight goes there, and it's also a discovered defense of this pawn by the queen. Now the knight moves out of the way, queen's defending the pawn. Bishop comes out now, preparing to castle short. Bishop's not doing a great deal here because it's looking at the back of that pawn's head. So I now play c3. If d takes, b takes, that's fine. And now black castles. Okay, so we've got a situation where black has a 5 and a 2 in terms of pawn structure. I have essentially a 6 and a 1, but with this very advanced e-pawn, it's more like 3 pawn islands. And obviously black has the bishop pair. Both of them are looking down towards my king side, which is where they want to be. I have a bishop and a knight. But now d4, so I'm building a bit of a dark squared barricade, making this bishop worse. It really doesn't have anywhere useful to go now, so it retreats to e7. Might come back on the opposite side of this pawn chain. Now bishop to d2 just connects the rooks, and we have a proposed trade of queens, and we trade off queens. Okay, so very, very tight, very close, even at this point. So what I need to do now is I need to look at what the imbalances are on the board, right? Because materially we are equal, numerically we're equal, right? We've got the same number of pieces, we've got the same value of pieces. What is the difference? The difference is I've arguably got a stronger centre. This pawn is now better since we linked it up with its buddies here on the dark squares. Black does have a light squared bishop, which can get through my pawn chain, right? So that's a strength, I would say. It's a plus on black's side. Both of us have a dark squared bishop that isn't particularly useful, but I would say the most significant difference at this point is that I have a knight. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to try and steer the game in a way that my knight becomes more useful, right? So I'm maneuvering my knight round here. We have rook to b8, and now I push in the middle. So I'm really striking out to grab this space in the board. I want to shut down these bishops if I can, reduce their influence. Bishop in there, proposed exchange, doesn't want to do it, attack the rook, rook moves, okay? We have h6, rook moves again to defend this pawn. And now this rook attacks the bishop, which is defended by the knight. So it all gets a bit heavy and intense in this corner of the board now. Other rook lines up, I drop my bishop back, and now I'm starting to, I just want to get my king off the back rank really, try and get it to somewhere with a bit more safety. Bishop now comes in, so there's potential of discoveries here as well. So I now move my bishop out the way. So now my rook's alone patrolling the back rank. Okay, bishop attacks knight, king defends, king advances. Now this I think was maybe not a great idea because I've actually undefended this pawn here on c3. So I attack the bishop, bishop moves back, and now I move again. So I really wanted to be here and defend this pawn. So now the rook slides over and attacks the pawn on c2. So we propose an exchange of rooks, we swap off rooks, and now I lose that pawn. Pawn is gone, so I'm a pawn down. However, I do have a rook on the open file, and black also has kind of some loose pawns around here. Okay. On the other hand, my king's looking fairly snug in the corner. Okay, so rook comes up b6, attacking one pawn. Rook comes down, attacking another pawn. I grab, and now bishop moves. This was a funny move, right? I don't quite get why Lorenzo didn't just grab the pawn, but in doing so, he would have actually essentially kind of pinned both of his pieces, right? If he grabs the pawn there, and you've got the rook on a2, the bishop can't move anywhere because I take the rook, okay? But likewise, if the rook moves anywhere, I take the bishop. So this is one of those interesting kind of double pin situations where the rear piece is defending the front piece, yeah? Okay, so bishop b4, and I just push a3, hit the bishop. Okay, so we've now equalised again. I've got my pawn back. Rook there pinning the pawn, so I can't take the bishop or else rook takes rook. So I just slide my rook back, now paying attention to this pawn. Okay, rook takes, and now we have a key decision to make. Do I grab the pawn or do we trade rooks? The big fear is, you always have to be very cognizant of your opponent's greatest threat, right? Whenever you get into an ending, and we're in the ending now, the queens are off the board, you have to say, okay, if black's going to win this, what has to happen? And the most likely thing is this pawn promoting. Okay, so we really want to take out that pawn. So I decide here to grab the pawn on d7 rather than trade rooks. I mean, it's a free pawn, right? Rook b3, grab another pawn, why not? Now, black now decides to trade the light squared bishop for my knight. I'm kind of happy about that. Another thing that it always is worth bearing in mind as well is what colour is the promotion square, right? So I have a dark squared bishop, and the promotion square here for the pawn is also dark squared. So, I mean, what can I do? I can move the king out the way, bishop to here, maybe, to guard that square, or more likely, rook across to the c-file, okay? So we have bishop there with a skewer on the king moves, and we trade off bishops, all right? So now we're in a situation where white is a pawn up. This pawn is actually hanging because the rook can capture it. This is the danger piece, okay? So black, instead of grabbing the free pawn, pushes. I slide my rook over to patrol the c-file, and black's now in a bit of a bind because he can't push the pawn because rook takes. Okay, he also can't vacate the third rank because rook takes pawn as well. All right, so I'm actually 2 pawns up. No, I'm not. I'm 1 pawn up apart from this guy here. So king comes across, I take the opposition with king g4. That's the opposition. You're 2 squares away in line. And we have pawn pushes forward with check, king retreats g3, king in now, and now I grab the other pawn. Because I've got, I do actually have time. If the pawn wants to move, I've got time to get back. Right? Pawn pushes forwards again with check. So I grab that pawn. I'm now actually 3 pawns up. And the pawn pushes, and it's no worry. I just slide the rook back over, right, to guard. Rook comes across, boom. Okay? And that danger pawn is now gone. So now black has only 1 pawn on the board. I have 5 pawns on the board. King grabs 1. I defend the f pawn. I'm not worried about the d pawn that can go because my my big hitter now is Harry the h pawn, and off goes Harry. Okay. Interesting, this one. The king could have grabbed the h pawn at this point, but decided to move the rook instead. King starts to annoy the rook. Rook moves over to the h file, and now I think Harry has a free run to the line. Black's e pawn simply doesn't have the same time. This is far too behind. And then we have queen, and it's going to be relatively all over pretty soon. So just making sure that I don't stalemate my opponent, maneuver the queen round. Really all I need to do is just get rid of the rook. By one way or another, get rid of the rook, and I should be absolutely fine. I just want to make sure. So pawn pushes, king pushes behind it, and now I grab the rook, because here this is a pin situation. So the rook is mine one way or the other. King attacks my rook, we trade off rooks, and it's going to be a simple. You have to be very, very careful not to stalemate in this situation, which is why you've got to drill these simple, straightforward endgames. Right? I knew this was a win, so without stalemating, okay, get my queen onto the adjacent file in this case. So here I'm confining the king to the h file. Can't go here because it'd be in check, so it has to go into the corner. And now king f3. So you see these squares, these are all the squares the knights jump to very often at the start of the game. c3, c6, f3, f6, right? If you can get your king onto one of these, you should be all right, right? So king has to go there, queen g2, checkmate, and that is how to beat Lorenzo. So and it was a bit of a grind, really, just basic, quite principled chess. Maybe the odd unusual decision on the bot's part, but you know, that's what happens. That's what you get when you play humans. You get it when you play bots as well. Okay, but satisfying win. First win for me over Lorenzo. Hope it was interesting for you. I want to thank you for watching. Do really appreciate your support. Please subscribe to Chess Bootcamp if you haven't subscribed. We're there to help beginners and improving players to get the rating higher, win more games, and just enjoy playing chess more. Okay, so yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you soon.